Right. I'm recording this video because of the problem that we had in today's class. Um, the technology actually betrayed us, and because of the laptop, the recording stopped. So there is a long gap in recording, which is posted on Teams. So I'm recording this just to make sure that whatever was those who were online, because that is the bigger group, they can listen to what was said in that time. So we started today with history of psychology, and as I explained in that video also, that we're not going to go exploring the history of psychology, different schools of thought in psychology, when a certain school emerged and when different schools evolved and changed and merged and um, uh, separated from each other. So we're not going to look at into it, but these are, if you look at this screen, so this is what you can see, that there are different um, what we call types or different ideas around psychology. There is Gestalt psychology, which is Gestalt is a German word which means full, whole. So they look at when they study psychology, they look at holistic picture, whole image, rather than looking at smaller chunks of certain thing that they're observing or they're studying. Then structuralism looks at how different whatever we the way we behave, mental structure, mental thinking. So they believe it is all structures. So we have to study. So they divide those things into structures. So intros, then functionalism. They believe William James is known for that. So they are looking, as you said, that how mental processes adapt to people survive in the natural world. So how do we survive? How do we function? What do we need to function in a certain world or to survive in a certain world, right? So that is functionalism. Um, and then introspection method, which is thinking about what I'm doing, what I should be doing in a certain society, in a certain environment, in a certain world. So those are things. There are different what we call areas or perspective of studying humans. One of the a way to study humans or their psychological or the behaviors or their thinking, what they think, what they do not think, what they do, what they do not do, is neuroscience. So neuroscience is, you must have seen maybe in movies or in videos where people, their brains are connected with uh, wires, and which those wires are connected with monitors. So so the people who are studied in neuroscience, they see when something happens, when something is said to them, which might be making them happy or sad, which part of the brain becomes active and how much of that brain is active. So they're trying to see if some of the people who may not be um, cognitively or mentally strong, or they might be weak in certain areas, so their brain could be compared with another person who might be strong, and then they might be trying to find out, maybe discover or invent certain medication or certain maybe strategies to find if that particular area could be activated or reactivated and make that area function more. um, then psychodynamic, this is what we call, Sigmund Freud is known for it. He believes that whatever we are at when you are adult, when you're grown up, um, the experiences that we had as a child actually shape what we become when we grow older, right? So if you are polite, if you are generous, um, if you have all the positive qualities, then of course, if we are going to believe this school of thought here in psychology, it will be said that because you had experienced all these things in your childhood, that's why you are this, right? If you are angry, if you're always fighting with others, if you're always hurting others, then of course they might say that you might have been in your childhood been abused or been beaten up by someone, or because of those unpleasant experiences you become what you are when you are grown up. So that is what we call psychodynamic ideas. And behaviorist, they believe, as you see, Ivan Pavlov, we will look at Ivan Pavlov's experiment when we are going to study the behaviorist perspective of learning. So they believe that whatever happens around us actually, or around is actually shape what we do or decide what we do. So they have given this word stimulus. So it could be a situation, it could be an object, it could be an event or a person. So those things outside us affect the way or produce a certain response from the one who is part of that environment. So there is stimulus and the response. So the concept of stimulus and response is actually part of behaviorist perspective of understanding humans, right? So we will look at it in detail when we come on to behaviorist perspective of learning. Then cognitive perspective, that they focus on people, what people think, what they can think, what they can understand, what they cannot understand, what they can discover and know, and what they can't. So all this is based on their cognition, the mental process of the processes, how much information they can process, what kind of information they can process, all of those things. The last theory is humanism. So you have to, this is humanism, this is not cognitivism, this is humanism. The people such as Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers, they believe that humans are supposed to be striving towards some goal, which they call self-actualization, right? Self-actualization is the goal, and this can only be achieved when a certain set of conditions are met. So if you can Google Maslow's hierarchy, so you will see a triangle. The below, the biggest area is the physical needs such as security and food and all that, and the top of the pyramid is the self-actualization. So if all those um, um, needs and desires are met, the conditions are fulfilled, then person is able to achieve what he or she should be in his or her life, which is called self-actualization process. Okay, then we looked at in today's session what is educational psychology, and many of you are already familiar with the term educational psychology, and many of you said that it's a branch of psychology where the focus of study is learning and teaching. How we learn, what make us learn something, what doesn't, what help us in our learning, what doesn't help in our learning, what contributes in, what motivates people to learn. So education psychology is branch of psychology where the focus of, or what we study in this branch is classroom learning, classroom teaching, students learning, how they learn, what they can learn, what they cannot learn, how much they can learn. So all this is studied or researched in educational psychology. So the knowledge related to teaching, learning, classroom, schools, and all related areas, textbook, teacher education, how should the building be constructed of a school or a university. So all that is related to educational psychology. Now, there are two areas in psychology. One is basic psychology and the other one is applied psychology. As I said, basic psychology is where knowledge is created. And this is actually what we call researchers, knowledge creators. They are usually found in universities, centers of excellence, teacher education institutes. FCC also has a teacher education institute, but we do not have a what we call center of excellence in educational psychology. If we had, then we must be studying how all these areas of teaching and learning. The other one is applied, which is the application. So there are a lot of, there's a large group of practitioners, such as teachers, counselors, which are found in school, technologists, so instructional designers. So they all are users of the knowledge created by the people who are working in higher learning institutions or research centers. So those are the ones who carry out different research projects, and they identify or they try to explore and find out what is conducive to teaching learning environment and what is harmful or maybe a barrier to students learning and teachers teaching. And as we said, the purpose of all the knowledge that should be created should be human beings, and whatever their problem is. Since we're talking about educational psychologists, we're looking at problems related to teaching and learning. Then there are different types. Then there are different areas. Though we didn't see, we will look at in our next class on Thursday, when we'll try to finish the next part of it. We also looked at what we call research. How is knowledge created? So we looked at that knowledge is created through research, and there are different types of researchers, as many of you were able to identify the two types of researchers, such as qualitative research and quantitative research. And there is the third research approach, which is mixed methods research, where a researcher uses both qualitative and quantitative data. Now, when we say qualitative research, it's actually, we deal with words. The words could be found in textbooks, the word could be found in interviews, the words could be found in any newspaper, news articles, and we study those. Now, those words, we can look at what we call the frequency of a certain word or a phrase appearing over and over. So if we're looking at the frequency, then that becomes quantitative research. We are looking at the quantity of the frequency of a certain word or a phrase. And because it also helps us to look at or decide a certain behavior, or help us to understand a certain person. So that is, but in education, in classrooms, most of the researches are actually quantitative, and some of the researches are qualitative as well. Though these days, the focus is shifting from quantitative research to qualitative research, because they believe the purpose of research should be to improve the human life, to improve the quality of teaching learning experiences, and that cannot be done just by giving by observing those experiences through numbers. So quantitative research is, as many of you identified in the class, deals with number. So we are looking at, and of course the focus is to study a certain phenomenon in a certain, with a certain sample, and then we try to generalize that particular phenomenon, and to say and to conclude certain whatever our conclusions are. We try to generalize those conclusions and findings to a wider population. So it's important to identify here that all researches are always done on a smaller sample, on a small group of people, which we call sample. And that is what makes it difficult to generalize the conclusion of the findings of a certain research. Though it may be true that some of the findings could be generalized, it may be that may not be generalized. Right? So there are many reasons for that. And so the point I'm highlighting here is that a research is always conducted on a smaller number, which we usually call sample. And there are different ways of selecting who will be part of a certain research project. So we are not going into that, because that is, we should be studying it in a research method. So that is what research is. So there are different ways to collect what we call data for our research, because research means having data. Whether we study that data in using some qualitative method, or we study data using quantitative methods, such as using different statistical tests, such as t-test, z-test, and all sorts of tests which are there, pi and chi, and all those tests are there. And then those tests help us actually to understand um, whatever we want to, we are trying to find out in that research project. So the data is gathered through, in education, in classrooms, data is gathered through surveys. You might give students a questionnaire. You might ask questions from them. We have online form, online surveys. You might collect it using a paper, but these days people are using online data collection method. The other is this observation. So descriptive research, where you are describing certain thing, trying to identify a certain maybe a practice, why it is happening, why this is not happening, and something else is happening. So there are different ways to collect data. So one is survey, the other one observation. You can sit in a class and observe what is happening, what students are doing, why they are doing. Then you try to understand why they were doing what they were doing. So you might look at teachers, you might look at the text, you might look at the content, you might look at teaching strategy. It could be anything. Or then the other one is correlational research as well, which is trying to find a relationship between one thing and the other thing. For example, does technology helps in improving grades? So there are two things. One is technology, the other one is grades, better grades. So what is the relationship between technology and better grades? So when we are going, so we might have two groups. One group is taught using technology, and the other group is taught without any technology. So at the end of that experiment, both the groups are given the same content. So during experiments, both the groups were taught the same content, but one group was allowed to use technology, and the teacher also used technology, and the other group was taught without technology and was not allowed to use technology. So at the end of this experiment, then both the groups were given a test, and then their results of the test was compared. And when the results were compared, now there could be two possibilities, three possibilities actually. One is that the group which was allowed to use technology scored better than the group which was not allowed to use technology. So in that way, we could say that there is a positive relationship between technology and better grades, because the group that used technology scored better. Or there could be other way around, the group that was not allowed to use technology or did not use technology score better than the group which used technology. So in that way, there is a negative correlation. So there is negative correlation, right? And it might be that the third situation or scenario is that both the groups scored the same. So there was no change. There was no difference between the scores of both the groups. So in that case, we could say there is no link, there is no relationship between technology and better grades, right? So that is what we call um, uh, correlation research. So when we're doing this correlation research, it's an experiment. So we have control group, and there are independent variable and dependent variable. And we will look at in quickly what is dependent variable and what is independent variable. So in an experiment, we have experimental group. This is a group which received the active condition of independent variable. What is independent variable? Which is manipulated. Now in the example that I gave you, the relationship between technology and grades. So I'm using technology. This is what I'm manipulating. I'm manipulating technology. So the group which is allowed, which is taught with technology, is the experimental group. And the variable is that I'm manipulating is technology. And the other group, which is not allowed to use technology, is the control group, right? So they are not receiving that treatment of technology. And then that dependent variable also, right? Now, if, so you can see there is experimental group, the group which receives, which is actually treated as someone who is given a certain treatment, in this example, the technology. The control group is which is not given any treatment, that in this case, the group which is taught without technology. And then independent variable, which is variable in experiment, which is manipulated. In this case, we are manipulating technology, right? Or then variable is an experiment which changes as a result of independent variable. So is there a change? So grade. So grade is a variable here. So whether the grade goes up, grade goes down, or grade stay. So there is no difference. It stays the same. So that is dependent variable, variable group. So that is some of the terms which are used in experimental studies. As you can see, there is positive relationship, negative relationship goes down. It is from left to right. Positive is left, left, it's going up. As you can see, it's going left to right, and it is coming down from left to right down. It is going down, and zero relationship, it is straight line. So that is correlational research. So we are trying to see the strength of relation between two or more variables that we are studying. They have given an example. An education psychologist may ask, does a relationship exist between the number of questions teachers ask and the students' grade or academic performance? So in this example, there are two groups. One group is taught where teacher is asking lots of questions. So asking question is what we call is the treatment, is independent variable. So the group where teacher is asking question is the experimental group, and the group where teacher is not asking question is the control group, because that treatment is not given in that group, right? And independent variable group is the grades. Dependent variable is the grades, whether there is any change in grades because of this particular what we call use of strategy or instrument that is used here. So independent variable group, variable in an experiment. The variable here is question that we are asking, and that is what we are trying to manipulate the group. So if the group which where we have where we used questions, if it scores better than the other group where we didn't ask question, then there is a positive relationship. The line should go up. And if the group where we ask question didn't score higher than the other group where we didn't ask question, then there is a negative relationship. And then if both the groups score are equal, there is no difference, there is no significant difference, then that is zero correlation. If we look at this example, right? It ranges from +1 to -1. So zero is zero, no relationship, +1 is positive, -1 is negative. Zero means no relationship. So that is what we call survey questionnaire. Then we have observations. We can sit in a class and observe. As we're observing, we may fill in a form, we may record, we may transcribe. So there are a lot of, and this is also called naturalistic observations. So when we are trying to find out what motivates students, we actually follow this research method where we observe students and see what is it that is going to motivate them. What should we do in classroom that might motivate students to maybe do a certain task or study a certain subject? What reward should be offered? What punishment should be used? So those are the naturalistic observation strategies. Another way to collect data or information that we use in classroom. Interviews is another tool to use where we interview students, we might interview teachers, we might interview coordinators, principals, all those who are involved in educational process to find out if we are stresses, if we are exploring or studying certain thing. So we may use interviews as well. So the data that we're going to collect from interviews, of course, it will be qualitative research. Naturalistic observation is a qualitative research. Now, observation here, if we are checking tick, 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 and 1, 2, 3, 4, then that is a quantitative research. If we are going to describe, if we are going to write in what I am seeing, and I might bring in my subjective judgment here, then of course it will become qualitative research. If there is no subjectivity in writing, then of course that will be a quantitative research. So survey. So I'm going to stop here because that's what we did in today's class. So in next class, we will be looking at the rest of the reading which is here. So we are going to look at what is it that we studied in educational psychology, and we will also try to explore the areas which are main issues studied and discussed by educational psychologists.